Two UTSA teams took the field in the Tampa area on Thursday, both as underdogs facing powerhouse opponents, but their outcomes couldn't have been more different. For the soccer team, it was the best of times. Captain Zoe May's rallying cry, "We're not losing," sparked a gritty performance in extra time that propelled the team to victory. For the football team, however, it was the worst of times, as a string of unfortunate events led to another defeat on the road. With the basketball season also tipping off this past week, there's a lot to discuss in this episode. So let's get started.
This is episode 123 of the Hail Married podcast. I'm the Toves, and as always, I'm joined by my wife, A Toves. We're going to start with UTSA soccer because it has to. They are the story of the week. They are the reason why I am out of my head here, just bursting with pride with this for this team, as we've covered them all season. And they went on to win the American Conference Soccer Tournament with some late game dramatics because, of course, you know, going to have them, right? And clinch the automatic NCAA soccer tournament bid for the American Conference. So just huge congratulations to the team for everything that they did during the tournament. And obviously they worked their butts off during the regular season to put themselves in this position. But, you know, we'll relive everything here shortly that happened in the tournament. But that goal that they had, Atos, of getting to the American Conference tournament and not getting there the last two seasons, this time they get there. They didn't just go to Florida just to be happy about it.
Yeah, it was not good enough in their minds to just make it to the tournament. They wanted to win that tournament, and it was clear from the way they approached every game, but particularly that first game against UAB.
And we can't not, say huge congratulations to Coach Pittman and his assistants, Rob McGann and Colleen Pitts, as they were just fantastic in coaching this team during the tournament and really all season. But this tournament, I think, really showed some of the things that they did during the season now kind of all fit together because there were moments that they needed to make some crucial coaching decisions. And then you can't forget about the sports staff, you know. In particular, we know trainer Shelby Dale. We happened to just randomly talk to her a few years ago, and she was so high on this team, and she just has never left. And I think it's just part of who Coach Pittman is. I mean, you look at Derek Pittman, and it's his second conference title in 4 years, you know, but more than that, I thought it was just a fantastic coaching job. I know he's going to deflect to his assistants and his team for, you know, everything they did, but I thought he truly outcoached every single coach that they faced in the tournament. And there was some good ones there. Brooks Monahan is a great coach. I mean, he had Memphis at the top for a very long time. So it was just going through there and seeing what Derek Pittman has done. I mean, just revamping his entire roster and bringing in all these young players that are so talented and young. They kept talking about Memphis being so young, but this UTSA team has quite a few young players that are going to be exciting to watch, and Derek Pittman's done a fantastic job in development. So all of that culminates in this American Conference tourney appearance. And so, Tubbs, are you ready to relive the tournament?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, it all starts off with UAB, and, you know, I said in our last episode that the last time UTSA won the conference championship, they started off the run with the win versus UAB, and they started off with the win here 2-1.
Yeah, apparently there's good karma when soccer faces UAB in the first round.
And we'll take it, right? Because I think from the get-go, you even just mentioned it yourself, this game kind of set the tone for the entire tournament. They came out with an aggressiveness and with this really steely demeanor that, you know, really had both of us believing immediately that they weren't going to leave Lakewood Ranch, Florida without that trophy.
Yeah, or at least, you know, putting in every inch of effort. You know, UAB was a team that we had tied in the regular season, so you weren't really sure, you know, it's not like you were going into this with an advantage of, I've already beat this team once, I can do it again.
Right.
You know, both teams were coming into it, you know, knowing that they tied, but there was going to be a winner in this game. And like you said, UTSA just came out very aggressively. UAB is that kind of team that doesn't take a lot of shots. They try to limit the number of shots they take and make them, really be quality shots. But, certainly when you take that strategy, it limits the amount of chances you have to score. I think that was the difference in the game.
Yeah, it was, because you talked about the shots on goal here and the chances, and UTSA puts 9 shots on goal versus UAB's 5, and with that advantage, you see right away that UTSA is creating those chances, and because of it, that's the metric I think you need to look at. And had 2 really good goals. The first one from Michelle Polo, after some great assists from Bree Kerrigan and Ava Jackson, names that we'll hear again as we relive this tournament. And then later on, Aaliyah Durden scores off a corner by Leah Varela. The services on these free kicks have been terrific, and it started off early in this first game, and it feels just like it's a distant memory, Atos, because even though it was really just about a week and a half ago that we played UAB, it feels like it's been a month, because it led up to probably the biggest hurdle that UTSA had in this American Conference tournament.
Yeah, I mean, when we saw the seeding for UTSA and we saw that they would likely face Memphis, we knew that was going to be the biggest challenge of this tournament for them. And for our listeners who may not be that familiar with Memphis, calling them a stalwart is not an exaggeration. This matchup was truly a David versus Goliath battle. Memphis enters the game undefeated on the season. They're ranked 3rd in the nation, and no opponent had managed to score more than 2 goals against them all year. Just a few weeks ago, they beat us 2-0 at Park West. So defeating Memphis and denying them a spot in the American Conference Championship game for the first time since 2017 is just an achievement that cannot be overstated.
You mentioned that game, a few weeks ago at Park West, and that UTSA team that played that night looked overwhelmed. They didn't look like they were ready to go. Memphis outshoots them 10-2 in terms of shots on goal. But in the tournament, in the rain, Memphis still outshoots UTSA in terms of shots on goal, but it's only 9-8. Mm-hmm. UTSA finally started creating some chances, but they look like that confident team that came out against UAB. And from the start of this Memphis game, they looked like they were going to give it the best swing, and they were just going to go down fighting. And they were really doing the blue-collar things. They were getting dirty. They looked like it didn't matter what they needed to do. They were going to find every single detail and execute it in order to knock off this Memphis team. And it all culminates in them starting off strong by scoring first against Memphis. Michelle Polo has, as I said, going to mention her name a couple times. She starts off with a free kick, and it's a terrific free kick that Kudla, the Memphis goalkeeper, deflects, but can't parry it away to the right area. Instead, she sends it back kind of towards the middle, and as Memphis is trying to clear the ball, it actually ricochets off of Emily Ekman, and Ekman kind of, that deflection puts it in the path of Zoe May, and of course, friend of the show, Zoe May puts that goal away, and all of a sudden, we're looking at each other, and we're up 1-0 on Memphis.
Yeah, and then, of course, Memphis answered just a couple of minutes back to tie it at 1-1, and then we go from this kind of offensive show in the first couple of minutes of the game to really a long defensive battle where we're tied at 1-1, and getting towards the end of the second half, it almost felt like, okay, maybe we're going to hold on to this tie and we'll go to extra, time tied 1-1. And then, Memphis scores again.
Yeah, just to go back real quick to what you were saying about that long defensive battle, Memphis never really took control of the game. I mean, you could say that if you were watching it, that they had, or maybe had the better chances during that time, but even then, they just could never, ever get on the front foot and really push UTSA back. And, because of it, like you said, leading up to this, all of a sudden, we're looking at it 11 minutes left in the game, and we thought, what is going to happen, and then everything started happening because you then get
Right.
4 goals in the span of 11 minutes, and it starts off with Memphis scoring, and then about 5 minutes later they score again, and now we're looking at each other and saying, look, it's 3-1. If you're just going to look at the box score, you're going to think that Memphis just annihilates UTSA. But the reality was that they did not. UTSA had fought, and it's easy for us to come on here and say, well, we're UTSA fans. We're going to say that, they're fighting back on Memphis, that they really played a tough game, but it's hard to show 3-1 and say, yeah, it was a lot closer than it really was. But then Memphis kind of lets their foot off the gas, and because of it, they make some uncharacteristic mistakes, which even their coach comes back and said, looking back at the end of that game in regulation, that wasn't us. That's not who we were. And, we're going to go into the NCAA tournament, and we're going to use it as gas to fuel our fire to, go through the NCAA tournament. But this is what starts the downfall for Memphis, because the ball ends up at BB's foot, and she just gets 2 central defenders to kind of knock into each other. And they really kind of end up just obstructing not only themselves, but also the goalie. And I don't really understand. And I still don't, Atos. I mean, to this day, I just scratching my head why Kudla came out the way she did. And it just felt like a comedy of errors on the Memphis side, where BB could have just slammed the ball and tried to just take a hard shot. Instead, calmly gets around the defenders and the goalkeeper and puts it in the back of the net. We're now at 3-2. Now the score is looking a little bit better, but we're both hoping that there's an opportunity that maybe, just maybe, we have one more chance to tie up this game. And, UTSA fought. Memphis comes back and, can't really control the ball like they really want to. And so puts it in a position where UTSA wins a free kick. Here we go again, free kicks. And Michelle Polo goes up there. And, as I've said, Michelle Polo has been playing pretty well. This free kick practicing that they must have done throughout the season, but especially here in the tournament, feels like they really put themselves in a position to take advantage of it. And that was the advantage I think they had in all 3 games. So she puts it into the box. It deflects off of a UTSA player, I believe it was Cam Cloza, and it finds Aaliyah Durden's head, and Aaliyah sends it to the back of the net. And now we're losing our minds because it's 3-3.
Yeah, and like you mentioned before, it's not common to see that much offense in that short of a time period in soccer. And it's certainly not typical of UTSA because we're a very defensive-minded team. So for us to generate that amount of offense in that short of a period of time is really remarkable. And I think that's what really took Memphis by surprise, because they know we're a defensive team, and they thought once they got to that, 2-goal advantage that we weren't going to be able to generate that kind of offense. So after regulation ends and we're going into extra time, they break the huddle and Zoe yells, "We are not losing." And you could just tell from that moment the determination that UTSA had going into extra time. We were focused, we were ready. And, Zoe said, "I just knew at that moment that it was our destiny." And that's what the team looked like in comparison to Memphis, which kind of looked like they were still shell-shocked that they were in this situation with UTSA.
Well, as I said, their coach, Brooks Monahan, says that wasn't us. That wasn't who we are. And he's right. And it's hard to kind of imagine. Memphis just had no answer. And I also started out by saying that UTSA looked like they were going to do the blue-collar work, the dirty work to, find whatever detail they could get and execute it. And it was kind of interesting talking to Coach Pittman, because he said that they had found a couple of things that they put into their game plan. Obviously you're in tournament play, so you get whatever advantage you can find. They found it, and I think, that also helped put this at 3-3. And because of it, we now go through overtime. It's scoreless, and we get to PKs. And this Atos is where it doesn't matter how good Memphis is, we're now on a level playing field because penalty kicks is probably the most unnerving, I think, part of soccer.
Yeah, and going into this situation as a fan, it was nerve-wracking because we've only seen two players take penalty kicks all season because the games can end in a tie. So really
Right.
it's just when there's a penalty. We saw, BB miss one very early in the season. We saw Zoe make one, and then we saw Zoe miss one, although she got a rebound, which you can't do in this situation.
Right.
But those are the only two players we've even seen take penalty kicks at this point. So, as a fan watching it, you're thinking, okay, who are the girls that they're going to put up? And, are they going to be in the right mindset? And I think the biggest surprise was that we see Jasmine Kessler go up first.
Yeah, and talking again with Coach Pittman, he had said that he had talked to Kessler, said, hey, look, if we get to that situation, are you comfortable taking the kicks? And they practiced them, and she's fine with it. And then he told her, you're going to be first, which I don't think really clicked in her head that she was leading off this entire UTSA lineup. But he pretty much just told her, kick the hell out of the ball and just try to make a hole in the net. And Ashley Henderson is the first kicker because Memphis won the coin toss, so Memphis decided to go first. And Ashley Henderson was, you could tell, wasn't in the right mindset. And, Pittman even told me the same thing. If you thought she was pissed on TV, she's even more pissed in person. And she just sails that first one. That pretty much opens the opportunity for UTSA to take advantage. And advantage they did because, as we said, Kessler comes up and she knocks the hell out of the ball. Pretty much, I'm surprised there wasn't a torn net because of just how Kessler kicked that ball. But then we get to the second kicker, and it's Ai Kitagawa for Memphis. She goes a direction that I don't think either the coaching staff or Kessler were expecting. So she gets that one, but then it comes up to Zoe May. And
I just felt like as soon as I saw her walking towards the goal that she was going to make it because you could just see this look of determination and confidence, in her demeanor. So, of course, she kicks the ball, she makes it. She's the captain of the team. And then Memphis sent their captain, Finley Lavin, up right after that. So it was captain to captain. And just the juxtaposition between those two was so striking because Finley walks up and she looks ill almost. Like she looks scared and intimidated. And she misses her shot. She sails it over the net just like Ashley Henderson did. But to me, it wasn't just the contrast between the two captains. It was kind of that contrast between the two teams.
yes.
And their mindset at that point.
You hit it right on the head because that's really what it came down to is going into these penalty kicks. I mean, obviously you think from a fan, we started talking about the fact that, look, Memphis is pretty good, but this is now becomes a 50-50 thing. Memphis did not look confident whatsoever. And you're right. I think Finley Lavin just exhibited exactly what Memphis was feeling like. And outside of Kitagawa, the other three shooters for Memphis, I thought were bad. I mean, they just did not execute whatsoever. Whereas you had Kessler, May, and then Bree Kerrigan. Kerrigan comes up, and again, you were talking about like, well, we've never seen anybody else. Well, here we've the second of three kickers that we hadn't expected, and Bree Kerrigan goes up. She nails her penalty kick, and the thing is that even though she looked a little bit more hesitant than Zoe or Kessler, she still made it. And that was big because it really came down to the last kicker because now Memphis has to score. Kessler gets the save, and we get the win. And I think both of us lost our minds. Our neighbors probably wondering what is going on in the Tovar household because to see the celebration from the team after that, to have outlasted Memphis where, you wouldn't have thought going into this game. And we've already said throughout this entire game how just seemed like it was a mountain to climb, and we climbed it and we hit the summit and we went past it. It almost felt like a relief going into the championship game because I know it's going to sound silly, and I'm not discounting Rice whatsoever. Rice won in penalty kicks against USF, but they went a longer penalty kick session. And, so who's got the advantage? Was it Rice? Is it UTSA? You could go either way on it, but the reality is that you had two tired teams going into this game that had, really suffered through their semifinal wins. And, Atos, I was pretty sure UTSA was going to win the conference tournament. The question was, are they going to do it in regulation? Is it going to take overtime? Or are we really going to go back to penalty kicks? I don't know if I can take it if we go back to penalty kicks.
Right. I mean, again, we tied Rice in the regular season. So, it was interesting because this is the second team that we faced that we tied. And then Memphis, of course, we lost to in the regular season. So, again, we didn't really go into this game with an advantage. But you could feel the team's determination kind of coming into this game.
Much like the regular season game, Rice kind of starts strong. But unlike the regular season game, they do not get an early goal. So it felt like they kind of expended most of their gas in the first 15 to 30 minutes. I was concerned about Leah Chansey, their star midfielder. She's a fantastic player. I'm a fan of hers. I think she's, obviously can do quite a bit for her team, and she does do quite a bit for her team. There's a reason why she was a first team, All-American Conference player. But I thought that Leah Varela, and you add Zoe May and Addie O'Kelly in there because all three of them kind of matched up with Chansey, and they did a fantastic job in neutralizing her. She had a couple early moments, but after that, it was really a lot of just keeping the ball away from Chansey and not allowing her to put her stamp on the game and to give her a shot to give Rice a lead.
Yeah, the other concerning thing that happened in this game somewhat early in the game was that Haley Lopez got injured. And when she went down with that ankle injury, it just kind of gave me a little bit of pause because she's really played very well in these games since she's come back from injury this season. And you always hate to see someone go down with injury a second time.
Yeah. And, I think based on what we saw from the game, it looks like, she probably may not play, but, today when they left for Lubbock, it looks like she's walking without a boot. So hopefully that's a good thing. Who knows whether she plays or not. But throughout this tournament, I hadn't seen a freshman defender, Casey Grauman, and I've been big on Casey Grauman. It's just she's one of the first players I saw, freshman, I guess I should say, that I saw play, and I was very impressed with the way she handled herself. So hadn't seen her during the entire tournament. We find out later that, she was sick throughout the entire tournament. So, hopefully she's better by Friday, and hopefully we have an opportunity to have her on the field because our outside backs now, we're down two because Grauman's not there, and Haley Lopez goes down. Izzy Lane, who we didn't mention in the Memphis game, actually went to the back and was playing one of the outside backs. Izzy Lane is a forward, or has been playing forward. She hasn't played in the back since the preseason because I remember watching some of those games and saying, oh, he's got Izzy Lane playing back there. But that's, again, development by Pittman and his staff, putting these players in different positions, especially early on in the preseason, and just making them much more versatile. And because of it, I think Izzy Lane had a fantastic game. I mean, she had a really good tournament. But I think somebody else had a really good tournament. And, I know it's an opponent, but it's Rice goalkeeper Kirsten Ruff. She was fantastic. She just kept turning away shot after shot from UTSA. Atos, I thought it's going to take something really special to beat her. And I'm not sure how many more special opportunities we've got in us because it just felt like any time that we had built something up, we just couldn't get there.
Yeah, I mean, early in the game, I thought BB was going to score, and she had a very similar shot in the Rice game that she had in the Memphis game, but it was just off a hair. And, it just seemed like we had those little opportunities. I mean, we had 10 shots on goal to Rice's 5 during this game, but it just seemed like they were either just a teeny bit off or the Rice goalkeeper was right there in the middle of it.
UTSA's defense was just rock solid against Rice. They blocked a lot of shots, deflected quite a bit, really affected how Rice was able to attack. But There was a moment that I think got a little nervy late in the game, and especially here in overtime.
There was this moment about 8 minutes into extra time where Rice forward Olivia Duval is driving towards the goal, and it looks like she has her defenders beat. It looks like it's
Yeah.
going to be one-on-one
Yeah.
with Kessler, and she may make this shot. And you're in the background kind of saying, oh no, oh no. And then all of a sudden, Aaliyah Durden comes out of nowhere. I mean, she had been off to the side, and then it was like she hit the sprint button on a video game and just jetted her way through to be able to deflect the ball. And of course, the shot goes off target. And at that moment, even the announcer said that might have been the defensive play of the game.
It was. It absolutely was. And I'm glad you brought it up because in all of this, you kind of forget some of these smaller moments. And that one in particular, you're right. It looked like Duvall had the angle. And had she squeezed off that shot before Durden gets there, I think we're having a different conversation right now, Tobes, about how we just came up short. And well, it doesn't happen, right? So the question is now, well, can we, we've got some heavy legs out there. Can we make it one more extra session shortly after this? The play, I think, that's going to end up being in UTSA lore. We think, we're not really sure, but the ball, I think, travels to Emily Ekman, but she gets fouled. Somehow she once again puts the ball onto Bree Kerrigan. Bree Kerrigan collects the ball, starts driving towards the goal, makes a move, gets it to her left, and takes a shot that earlier in the game probably goes wide. But at this moment, she hits the shot right on the money. It's left upper corner. Kirsten Ruff had no opportunity to get this one, and UTSA scores. Elation. It's 1-0. You just see the players just pour onto the field, and I don't know, Atos. I mean, just watching all their celebrations, it was, I felt it for them because, you know, we saw how hard they worked. We've covered them all year on this podcast, and just to see them actually hit their goals, just fantastic.
I mean, Zoe May said it. It was their destiny.
Right, right. So Bree Kerrigan, speaking of her, ends up with the most outstanding offensive player. You know, to me, you could have made a case for Michelle Polo because we brought her up a few times. But Bree, you know, you look back and she had an assist early in the UAB game, which we talked about how Michelle Polo scored. In the Memphis game, she hits the essentially game-winning penalty kick for UTSA. And then in this game, it's the game-winning goal. So, you know, I was high on Bree Kerrigan last year. You know, I thought she was kind of coming on, and then all of a sudden she goes down at a game against Colorado State in Park West, and all I kept thinking about was we just can't have nice things. Like Bree Kerrigan was just beginning to get going, and, you know, unfortunately her season is cut short because of a torn ACL. But it was a fun story that Pittman had about her, especially just trying to fight back to get to playing again, honestly.
Yeah, he was talking after the game about how, you know, after her injury, when she got to the point where she was recovered enough to start, you know, really practicing and becoming part of the conversation, that they had talked about, you know, whether she wanted to try to redshirt this season or if she wanted to play. And she just said, you know, I want to be a part of this team. This is a really special team. You know, I want that chance. And, you know, so she gets back in, you know, into the rotation. And then a couple of weeks ago, when they went to the Tulsa game, she didn't make the travel roster. And, you know, Coach Pittman said that really upset her. So she went back to work and worked even harder to get, you know, herself back to the point where the coaches would, you know, put her on a travel roster again. And, you know, here she is in the biggest match of the season, and she gets her first goal. And it's just crazy to think that the winning goal was her first goal of the season. But you also have to give credit to the coaching staff to put that kind of trust and faith in her, because a lot of times when you've had, you know, an athlete who's been out and hasn't had that much playing time, hasn't scored a goal, you're not willing to put them into those types of situations. But, they knew that she could do this. They trusted her and they put, that faith in her. And here she is. She's the one that scores basically 2 winning goals.
Yeah.
The penalty kick at Memphis and then the golden goal to get us the conference championship. So just a great story for her.
Yeah, so I go back to the beginning of the season when we did the soccer preview, and you asked him about, like, well, how are you going to do it? You're going to actually play all these freshmen. He's like, yeah, we're just going to throw them out there. And while Bree Kerrigan is a redshirt freshman, remember, she started last season, but she only played like 6 games. Mm-hmm. And then she's only gotten into about 6 games this season. So still relatively green in terms of, a player and playing at this level. But to be able to do this, I go back to everything you said, this whole thing about the coaching staff, Derek Pittman has been very good at development. And I brought it up a little bit earlier, but the fact that he looks at his players and challenges them. He's talked to us plenty of times about how he challenges these players. Just a fantastic way of repaying his challenge by putting yourself in this position. So we could go on and on about Bree Kerrigan, but I think we need to move on to the most outstanding defensive player of the tournament, and that was Jasmine Kessler. I would again say you could have made certainly a case for Aaliyah Durden because of that play that you talked about. I mean, that I think is always going to be that we talk about in football, some of the key plays that we don't remember, right? But that one there has to live in the lore too. I mean, just to see that moment, and I've watched it over and over just after you mentioned it, just her just sprinting, it's terrific. But Kessler, doing it over and over within this tournament, fantastic save after fantastic save, against Rice, she just was impenetrable. She was not going to let that ball go into the net. So
you can almost make the argument for Jasmine, though, that, her biggest play of the tournament was kind of an offensive play. It was that penalty kick, right?
That was a hell of a kick. I have questions for her, I guess, next time I see her, but let's talk about the all-tournament team. Brooklyn Bailey, Aaliyah Durden, Zoe May, Bree Kerrigan, and Jasmine Kessler. Again, you could make the case for a few other players that we've talked about. Michelle Polo. Somebody I didn't talk about was Leah Varela. She had another really good tournament. Izzy Lane, for being able to switch from playing up top as a winger, the first game against UAB, and then the next 2 games playing in the back. And she played, I believe, every single minute. Like, Izzy Lane, I don't know how she did it, but she just seemed to be an Energizer bunny out there. Now, I think one of the funnier things is always hearing, Coach Pittman yell at her, stay on your feet. But you know what, whatever it takes for her to make the plays that she makes, I'll take it, because I thought she was fantastic. But certainly I think we could gush all about this team, and maybe we'll do, more of a soccer recap for the season. But I think it's time to go on to our upcoming opponent, first round of the NCAA tournament, Toves.
Yeah, so there's definitely at least one more game left of the season. UTSA is going to play Texas Tech in Lubbock at 6 p.m. on Friday. The game will be on ESPN+. There's also a watch party at Little Woodrow's on 1604 and Braun if you can't make it to the game. I think it's interesting that we drew Texas Tech in particular as the team we're playing, because our other captain, Cam Closet, is a former Red Raider, so she will be going up against her former team in this match. And it might be some good karma, because our other captain, Zoe May, faced her former team, Memphis, in the conference tournament. So perhaps there's some good karma here, and the captains going against their former team.
Postseason play, you gotta love it, right? Well, this Texas Tech team is pretty good. I think, though, this is going to be a winnable game. And, it could happen in overtime, or it could happen in penalty kicks. Who knows? This UTSA team, as we've already seen, can win it at any time. Let's talk about a little bit more about Texas Tech, and that's head coach Tom Stone has been at Texas Tech for 18 seasons. He's got over 200 wins in his Tech coaching career. Just a fantastic career. He's done it at the junior level for U.S. women's soccer. He has been a scout for some of the World Cup teams. So this is a coach that knows soccer and knows, honestly, what it's going to take to knock off any opponent. And watching his interview in terms of the announcement of playing UTSA, it's clear that he knows Derek Pittman, and he showed just the fact that he knows that this is going to be a tough game for them. I said it's a winnable game. I'm not saying this is going to be like, a 3-0 win or 2-0 win. It's going to be a tough game. It's just that I don't believe Tech is as good as maybe the TCU team that we played earlier this season, or even the Memphis's level. They're still good. And you'll see here as we talk about the key players. First one being Taylor Sherjeski, redshirt junior forward. She's a first-team All-Big 12 player. 15 goals, 3 assists. Just a very talented offensive player. And again, is going to challenge this back line for UTSA. We faced quite a bit of good forwards this season. Ashley Henderson obviously comes right to mind immediately. Taylor is going to be tough, and she's partnered up top sort of with Peyton Parsons. Peyton Parsons is a senior forward / midfielder. She's a first team All Big 12 selection as well. 6 goals, 4 assists. The stats don't show it, but Peyton certainly a very good player and a name that you're going to have to watch out for. On the defensive end, they've got Macy Blackburn, who's a redshirt senior defender. She's the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, and she's also a first team All Big 12 selection. So she does have 4 goals and 12 assists, but she may have earned, I think, maybe first team All Big 12, maybe for those offensive stats, Atos. But I think it really comes down to the fact that she's a terrific defensive player, and we're going to need to figure out a way to neutralize her on the defensive end if we're going to score some goals, because she's going to make it tough for us to get any of those shots off. Finally, we get to goalkeeper Faith Wynn, senior goalkeeper, second team All Big 12 selection. She's got 57 saves on the season and 9 shutouts, a .733 goals against average. Don't let that number fool you. She is a very good goalkeeper, and it's going to be a challenge. But again, I think that with the talent level that Derek Pittman has put together with this UTSA team, they're young. I don't think they realize just how good they can still be. So I think it's going to be a tough game for Tech, and it's going to be a tough game for UTSA as well. But it's going to be one of those games that I think we're probably going to be on the edge of our seat for a while. So looking forward to it on Friday. Well, as we transition from talking about a team that won a championship in the Tampa area on Sunday, we go to the UTSA football team that put up a stinker Thursday night on ESPN in Tampa versus USF. Atos, the trailer continues to frustrate. This UTSA team is got a lot of good players, but I continue to harp on the fact that it's just not well coached. And instead of just addressing that, Jeff Traylor continues to deflect and talked about resources, and he talked about how much money that USF had spent on their squad. But even going into that game, it felt like he had already waved the white flag and said, this is going to be a loss. And what I don't like about it is the fact that he's just not suiting up for this game. It just felt like he's trying to prove a point that he can't win. And it's such a contrast to the fact that back in 2022, when they went to Austin to play UT, he was determined to tell everybody that they're going up to Austin and they're going there to win. They're not going there just to collect a check or just to play. They're going there to win. In this game, it felt like he was going to Tampa to collect a check, but there's no check because this is a conference game. So it was just another in the line of just embarrassing Jeff Traylor quotes and deflections.
Yeah, I think the most frustrating thing for me is that we've stopped talking about control what you can control. That used to be the mantra for Jeff Traylor. And instead of talking about the things that we can control, trying to fix the problems so that we play on the road the same way that we play at home, we're instead deflecting and, talking about other things that are excuses.
He just doesn't sound like a guy that has solutions. And that's disappointing because I felt like at the beginning of his tenure that he was different, that he wasn't going to, get after fans. Well, he did already. He wasn't going to complain about some of these resources stuff. Well, here he is complaining about it. And he looked like he had solutions to some of the problems. I mean, we talk about all the time. he was the coach during COVID. That's got to be the biggest problem any coach is going to face. Yet it feels like so long ago and something that like he's given up a long time ago. And we get to this game, Tobes. You kind of said it was sort of a series of unfortunate events, and I was like, okay, well, that's your point of view, but from my point of view, it was certainly a badly coached team that it's just a team that just doesn't have any answers whatsoever.
Yeah, and Coach Traylor did say after the game and during his press conferences this week that he feels that the team is mentally weak in road games. And he blamed that for the reason that we see penalties creep up, drop passes creep up, just a lack of energy on the sideline. And he admitted that, finally, that that's a coaching issue that he's got to address. But certainly the contrast between how we see this team play on the road versus how we see this team play at home is just, it's hard to describe, and it's hard to understand why it's so different.
Yeah, I mean, it's just unfortunate because this, like I said, there's some talent on this team, and I just don't think that it's being maximized. And so you start the game with a pick six, and that sounds like it's the most terrible thing that could ever happen. But the fact of the matter is, we could have done the same thing to Byron Brown. We didn't, but it's just those things that just happen, and then you come back and you have to face the music and you have to go back to on the field again. And this UTSA offense does get back on the field. They have a nice long drive. It looks like, well, okay, they just needed that one thing to happen, and now they're back. They've got the juice. They're looking good, and just a bad play call, in my opinion, at the goal line.
Yeah, and certainly it was a rough night for Owen. We have those first two drives into turnovers. We struggled to protect him. He was sacked, I think, 5 times, but you've got to give him credit because he has that mistake on the very first play. And then, like you mentioned, that second drive, he came back and he looked very poised. He looked very confident. Of course, then you have the second turnover, and then he's got to get right back on the field again. I mean, the weird thing about this situation was we didn't see South Florida's offense until I think about 2 minutes left in the first quarter. So you've got these turnovers, but then Owen's having to go right back out there. The third drive, they punt, and then fortunately there's this heads-up play by Chris Bryson on special teams where he realizes that, the punt has deflected off of a USF player, so it's a live ball, and he, jumps on it. So then, you've got Owen right back out there, third drive in a row. Unfortunately, we had to settle for a field goal at that point, but I mean, those could have been 3 crushing drives for any quarterback. But, Owen, they say he has a short memory. He came back there, he looked poised and, was trying to continue to move forward. But, unfortunately, we just continued to struggle.
He's just not the type of quarterback that can overcome this type of adversity from this coaching staff. Like there's just some bad stuff going on with the coaches. So anyway, you did get to see the tight ends continue to get utilized well, which is weird because it feels like it took them a while to get to that point. But you have Houston Thomas as a leading receiver, 7 receptions for 77 yards. You have Patrick Overmeyer, who had a 45-yard touchdown reception off, I think it was a double pass. Once again, the tight ends at times who have been underutilized this season, in my opinion, are stepping up. And you're not seeing the wide receivers really making a lot of plays on the road either. So that's also got to make you scratch your heads. But, it is what it is at this point. You do have, we still have a few more games to go and hopefully we can figure some things out. But at this point, it just feels like we're going to keep talking about the same issues over and over offensively.
Yeah, I mean, overall, we only had 309 yards passing, 72 yards rushing. But I think the other play that, needs to be called out is just Mekhi Anderson getting a touchdown in the second half. He's from that area. His family was there. So it's always really great to see, a player be able to score in front of their family and have that, opportunity.
We get to the defense, and Traylor can't stop talking about how bad the defense was. And I understand, but you got to find solutions. Like, again, we go back to that. You've got to figure out how to coach this defense to find ways to get at this, USF offense. And you talked about the fact that they were well rested because they had not been on the field either.
Right. I mean, they virtually were not on the field for the whole first quarter. But I think the biggest thing for me when they did get on the field, they just didn't seem to be able to adjust to the speed of USF. And we talked a lot about how fast USF plays. And we looked like we were really caught off guard.
Again, we have some players on defense, but it just doesn't feel like we're maximizing these guys.
Yeah, it's just disappointing. I mean, look, USF scores 31 points in the second quarter. So, it just seemed like they kept getting the ball and we just couldn't do anything to stop him. And even if we did get to Byron Brown, like it just looked like he was dragging our defenders with him as he got his first down. So, certainly Traylor said we've got to recruit better. We have to get bigger. We need to be more physical at the point of attack. But, I think to your point, we have the players. We just need to prepare them and put them in a better position on the road. I think in terms of special teams, we mentioned really the big play already, that heads up play by Chris Bryson on the punt in the first quarter. And then again, our specialists were consistent. Michael Petro was 3 for 3 on field goals. Cale Hogan had a 39.8 average punt and a long of 43. So again, our special teams has been consistent whether we're at home or on the road. And, fortunately, they're kind of the one unit, I think, in terms of the specialist on that unit that we can rely on regardless of where we're playing. All right, well, let's get to our last road game of the season against Charlotte. They have a new head coach in Tim Albin. If you look at the Charlotte record, the fact that they've only won one game this season and they haven't won a game in conference, you'd probably think that this isn't a very well-coached team. But Tim Albin won the MAC last season at Ohio, so hopefully he can get this turned around, and this is just an anomaly for them. They've had a ton of injuries as well, but it's been a really difficult rebuilding period for Charlotte. UTSA leads the series at 2-0. Kind of weird that we've been in Conference USA with them and the American Conference, but we haven't played them since 2016. We open as an 18-point road favorite, but again, I think that's largely because Charlotte has not won a game in conference and has only won one game all season.
And I think that one game was a FCS team. So they have not won an FBS game all season. Just crazy.
Yeah. On their offense, they're led by OC Todd Fitch. He was most recently an analyst at LSU, but he does have previous offensive coordinator experience from Louisiana Tech back in 2016 to 2019. He was there under Skip Holtz. So he has played against the Wilson era UTSA teams. Interestingly, part of the reason this offense has struggled a bit is that they lost their starting quarterback against Rice earlier in the season. One of the concerns kind of going into this season with Charlotte was the fact that their offensive line wasn't really that strong and they didn't have a lot of returners or veteran players. So Connor Harrell had won the job partially because he was a dual threat quarterback and likely going to be able to escape the pressure. Unfortunately with his injury, that has led to them making a quarterback change, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah, so let's talk about stats real quick. I mean, it's just bad, unfortunately, for Charlotte. They're in total offense, they're ranked 114th in the nation. They only put up about 324 yards, 25 yards a game. It's bad because that only puts them at scoring about 18 points per game, which is 124th. It's, again, not a very good offensive output. The only thing that's really close, I think, would be the third down conversions. They're 37.9%. That's 86 in the nation. Right in front of them is UTSA. So, maybe we see UTSA I think, convert some more third downs. I just don't see that this Charlotte offense is going to have too much success against this UTSA defense. But we're on the road, so who knows?
Right. Well, their key player is Grayson Loftus. Like I mentioned earlier, he won the starting job after Connor Harrell went down in the Rice game. He's a redshirt sophomore quarterback transferring from Duke. He's a pocket passer, not a runner. He only has about a 50% completion rate, though, for 766 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. Other key players are Javen Nichols, junior wide receiver. He's a transfer from LSU. He was kind of buried in the LSU depth chart, so that's why he was looking for another opportunity. He has 41 receptions for 541 yards, a 13.2 average, 3 touchdowns. They also have another wide receiver, Sean Brown, who had a really nice game last week against ECU. He has 25 receptions for 379 yards, a 15.2 average, and 1 touchdown. On the rushing side, Rod Gainey, Jr. is their redshirt freshman running back. He has 55 carries for 215 yards, 1 touchdown, a 3.9 average. And, I mentioned the offensive line that was a concern preseason leading to Connor Harrell, getting the starting job. Interestingly, though, when you looked at their PFF scores, they're not that far off from UTSA's offensive line, which, on the contrast, we've talked about, them being much better this season.
Yeah, and I think, PFF can be kind of weird at times, but this UTSA offensive line has struggled over the last few games. And, you've seen that affect Owen. They were actually obviously dominant against Tulane, but, on the road against South Florida and North Texas really had some problems. This Charlotte offensive line that we're talking about, I watched them play and they're okay. I still think that UTSA's offensive line is talent-wise is better. It's just, they've had some moments, especially against North Texas, where they really hung with North Texas for a little bit, but then North Texas just kind of pulled away from them. And so, you could see how, any team with some depth is going to be able to wear down this Charlotte defense and offense, namely here their offense. So we'll see if we can do that defensively, wear them down on the line, and it should be easy pickings to get to Loftus.
On the defensive side, they have co-defensive coordinators Nate Faines and Kurt Maddox. Both of them came from Ohio with Coach Albin. They have been fairly disruptive. They have 7 players who have forced a fumble, but unfortunately, they just don't have, the offensive performance, I think, to take advantage when they do create those turnovers.
All right, the Charlotte defense is bad. They're ranked 133rd in the nation. And when I was trying to figure out like a comparison, I was trying to look at Tulsa last season when we played them. Obviously, Tulsa, came back and won that game. Wasn't trying to bring that karma in, but at this point, who cares? This Charlotte squad, though, is just worse offensively and defensively. They just really can't stop the rush. So I think, this UTSA ground game could probably should be fine against this defense. And then passing wise, they just can't keep up. So they're allowing about 38 points per game, which ranks 132nd. It doesn't get better in conversions. This defense just can't get other opponents off the field. And because of it, they really struggle.
All right, let's talk a little bit about some of their key players. Reed Wilford is their senior linebacker. He leads the team in solo tackles at 28, total tackles at 50. He has 4 sacks and a forced fumble. He is one of their most disruptive players and kind of somebody to keep an eye on, along with Gavin Willis, one of their middle linebackers. He has 35 tackles, 15 solo, and 2.5 tackles for loss.
They also have defensive end Yamil Talib. He's graded pretty high on PFF. He's got half a sack and 2 tackles for loss. I know it doesn't sound great in terms of, stats, but it looks like he's pretty stout against the run and pretty good in terms of a pass rush. He's a smaller guy though. He only I think he's 6'4", 240. So he's a smaller guy going up against some of our bigger offensive tackles. I don't know that he's got the speed to get around us, but at the very least, he might be somebody to watch out for.
Jaquarius Conley is their senior cornerback. He has 1 interception, 1 pass defended, 1 forced fumble, and 1 fumble recovery. So again, somebody to keep your eye on in terms of the passing game. If we do have an opportunity where a pass goes a little bit awry or somebody gets out of position, Jaquarius could be someone who might come up with the ball. On special teams, their special teams coordinator is Brian Hayes. He came from App State last year. Their key player is Liam Boyd, their junior kicker. He's a transfer from NC State. He's been fairly inconsistent at field goal kicking. He's 8 of 10. He missed 1 in the 20s and 1 in the 40s, and his long is only 42. So I don't think you're going to see him, in a lot of critical situations. But, if he is put in that position, he hasn't been as consistent as some of the other kickers we've played against recently.
Interesting. Well, you want to start us off with our Hail Mary predictions?
This should be our first conference road win since 2023. But again, we don't know what team is going to show up. It should be an easy win. It should be, a big win. Again, Vegas is putting it an 18-point spread. But I just suspect this is going to be closer than it needs to be. I'm going to put my faith in UTSA, given all of Charlotte's struggles, but give me UTSA 24-21.
Wow. Well, this Charlotte team is just bad, and I can't see a way this UTSA team loses this game. But if they do, Jeff Traylor will have sunk UTSA lower than the end of the Wilson seasons. To me, I don't think there's any way around it. UTSA wins their first conference road game since 2023 and covers the spread. Give me UTSA 45-20 over Charlotte.
Before we go, I think there's really only one key game from the other football teams that we need to talk about that happened this past weekend. Tulane knocked off Memphis 38-32, keeps Tulane's hopes alive to make it to the conference championship, and effectively, I think, knocks Memphis out of that conference championship.
Oh, Ryan Silverfield. I just don't know how the guy just keeps getting his name mentioned for jobs and cannot get Memphis, with all of these resources, Jeff Traylor, to the American Conference Championship game. Just hilarious to me. All right, let's talk UTSA basketball. The men's basketball team took on College of Biblical Studies, and they won 97-30. There's nothing to take away from that game.
Yeah, it's just really hard when you're talking about a talent disparity that large to really gain a lot from everything that we accomplished in that game. So why don't we move on to the second game they played against SIEU, where we unfortunately lost 60-77 at home.
Yeah, I mean, I would have liked to have seen them pass the ball a little bit better against Biblical Studies. They had an opportunity to kind of pass around, and it looked like when they got to SIEU on that Friday matinee game that they hadn't taken it seriously enough on offense to be able to, pass the ball around. I mean, sometimes you can start off with an easy game like College of Biblical Studies, but it needs to set you up for success, and that should have set you up for success against SIEU.
Yeah, and Coach Clonch in his presser this week said, they're definitely a better team than they were in their exhibition game. And I would agree with that. Yeah. I mean, they certainly, took both of these games much more seriously. But, we talked a lot about the fact that they had too much kind of east-west passing going on and that they needed to really drive north and south down the field to try to, create more opportunities. They had a lot of missed layups in that SEIU game that, he wanted to get cleaned up. But he seemed to be feeling positive about the progress they're making and felt like, we could continue to build upon the things that he saw in that game.
Yeah, certainly. There's certainly a lot of talent on this team that you can get your hopes up, I guess. Young talent in terms of the two freshmen that they've got, Caden Rayfield and Dorian Hayes. I talked about them last year when we were talking about basketball. Both those young kids could be the nucleus for this launch, future here and in the next couple seasons. So, as long as I think they continue to develop, and I think they will, I think the one to watch is Caden Rayfield. He's sort of a freak looking kid. He's just really tall and slender, but really looks like he can do several things on the court. I think he can line up down low or he can come out. And as of right now, it looks like he's playing out as like a wing, kind of just playing out in the perimeter. So just a kid to watch out for. He reminds me a lot of Mia Hammonds, and I'll talk about her in a second when we get to the women's basketball team. But, certainly I think looking at this team, the only other player I would say is Mateo Coffey, who's also, I think, a freshman. He's a international player from France. Just three young players that I think could form something for Coach Clonch as we continue progressing in the next couple seasons in the Clonch era.
Yeah, one name to kind of keep an eye out on is Vashon Alette. We have not seen him play yet in the regular season. Coach Clonch said he's day-to-day, but should be in a uniform in the near future. So certainly a name to kind of keep an eye out for. But next up, they will be playing on Wednesday in San Marcos against Texas State, 7 p.m. on ESPN+, followed by Saturday in Denver at 1 p.m., and that game will be on the Summit League Network.
Well, let's get to the women's basketball team. They went to Lubbock in their first game and lost 79-52. They really kept it close in the first half, but lack of depth really hurt them, and we'll get to that here in a second. But then they traveled to Houston and really took it to a Big 12 team. I'd say after having the tough road trip to Lubbock, Houston presented a much more winnable game, and I thought that they were close enough to potentially get over the hump, but they lose it 52-48. Again, I kind of mentioned already Mia Hammonds, and I thought Mia Hammonds is a sophomore. She didn't really play too much last season, but this season looks like she's ready to break out. She's a lot like Caden Rayfield, kind of tall, slender, just sort of like this freak athlete that seems to be able to play inside. And I think Coach Aston has played her like in several spots, whether out in the perimeter or down low. And that versatility kind of adds a lot to this team. But I think with the two things that Rayfield and Hammonds can do is the fact that they've got so much length that they can really tie up these passing lanes. So something to look forward to, but also something that both need to work on. Mia Hammonds, I think, was creating a lot of havoc against Houston. Tech, that was another game where I wish had it not been at the same time as the football game and women's soccer that I probably would have been able to pay more attention to, or actually both of us could have paid more attention to. That one just got away from us. Houston, we paid more attention to, and that one there's hope, but Atos, it sounds like there's just not many players left on that UTSA bench.
Yeah, Coach Aston confirmed that Taylor Ross and Sima Udo will be out for the season. Ariana Hardaway did not play at Tech, but she was back for the Houston game and looked healthy, although she had maybe some limited minutes. But in Coach Aston's presser this week, it sounded like there are additional injuries that are serious and maybe are season ending. She didn't say that, but when she was asked if any of the other players would be back soon, she said, "We're all we got and we're all we need." From that, I took probably not going to see some of those other players for a long time, if not, perhaps not this season. So, I think it's going to be certainly a tough year for them. I wouldn't expect to see another championship run, but even with the limited bodies that they had, to see how well they played at Houston certainly gives you hope that they're going to be competitive. They're going to play with a lot of effort, and we may not win as many games, but I think they're still going to be a competitive team, even with a limited roster.
They're going to grow up in front of our eyes. And I think that's the biggest thing is if you want to see what this UTSA team is going to look like in the next couple of seasons, you're going to see it in Damara Allen and Mia Hammonds, as I've already talked about. But even so, you've got Idara Udo, who's linchpin of this team, and you've got some other really good players that are going to help. But, again, when you said, there's just a lack of bodies, you start wondering, well, what happens when they get into foul trouble? Or if somebody does get injured, like how does that hamper this team? It's just, unfortunately, lack of warm bodies after a championship season. I think they would have liked to have had a better look to the season after winning, the conference championship. But that's what happens sometimes. And unfortunately in basketball, a couple of injuries can really hurt you, but having more than that just really disrupts you.
Well, next up for them is the Texas State game on Thursday at 6:30 in the Convo. They will be hanging the regular season championship banner before the game. So if you have the opportunity to come to the Convo, make sure that you get there early pregame so that you can see the championship banner go up. And I just love the fact that we're putting the championship banner up when we're playing Texas State. It always feels good.
Well, hopefully we can kick their butt. So.
Well, thanks for joining us on the Hail Mary podcast. I'm Atovs.
I'm the Tovs.
We'll be back soon to recap our football game against Charlotte and our tournament game against Texas Tech.
Birds up.